episode of the Robert Palace Podcast. Thank you so much for joining me, ladies and gentlemen. And on deck for this week's episode, I dive into the Season 2 premiere of Peacemaker, which will be a featured show on this podcast. I believe it's going to be 8 episodes, so you'll get at least 8 straight weeks of me talking about Peacemaker on this show. It is the follow-up to Superman as established in the new DCU headed by James Gunn, which I'm totally invested in, so you're going to get my thoughts on that. And then I'm going to preview WWE's upcoming Clash in Paris, which is the final premium live event coming to you from Peacock. And I'll explain more about that later in the episode, but I'll talk about all the matches and break down all the stories going into it. But as always, we do start off with the box office report on this show. Again, apologies for not having an episode last week. I was still recovering from the flu, which, if you can still tell, I have a bit of a cough. Hopefully that won't be a problem on the show. But yes, I was dealing with that. I hadn't been sick in a very long time like that. So it was, felt kind of new, but, I feel a lot better now and back and ready to get talking to you on this show. So let's talk about the box office. Not a lot was missed. There was a lot of wrestling news, which we'll get to, but in the box office side of things and, movie news, like, it's been kind of light. And it usually is like that once we get into the early stages of fall, but, things are starting to roll once again. So good that I'm back up and running. So let's talk about the box office this weekend for the weekend of August 22nd through the 24th. The number one movie this weekend was actually not from a studio, like an actual movie studio. It was from the streamer Netflix. K-pop Demon Hunters took the number one spot, bringing in an estimated 18 million. Now, I think these are still just estimated numbers. I don't think Netflix is actually reporting the actual numbers, but I don't know how this is getting reported, but this is the number that they have. And it was enough to take the number one spot away from Weapons, which was heading into its third weekend. Now, this is a positive thing that K-pop Demon Hunters did well. I don't know if it'll open up Netflix's eyes to possibly releasing more of their streaming movies into theaters for a potential box office gold mine. Now, I don't think we've heard much from Netflix on their side. They're not really touting the success of it on the big screen because they want you to go to their platform and watch it. But, I mean, this is a positive sign for them. Hopefully they got people in their ear telling them, hey, maybe we should possibly rethink our strategy as far as, releasing movies like this into the theatrical world. Now, K-pop Demon Hunters didn't get hurt on the streamer either because it's also their most viewed movie of all time as well. So there's kind of give and take, you can have the best of both worlds. So that's something to look at for Netflix down the line, but I wouldn't be, if you're a consumer, too enthusiastic about future releases getting the same type of treatment. Number 2, as I just mentioned, was Weapons, which was the number one movie for the last 2 weeks, going into its third weekend. Dipped only 37% to bring in 15 million. Its total now stands at 115 million for Warner Brothers, so this is a huge hit for the studio, which they're just on a heater with everything they've been doing this year. Weapons, I believe, was a 45 to 50 million budgeted production, so it is, not only on the domestic side, but it's also doing pretty well internationally, almost bringing in 90 million. So this movie's brought over 200 million worldwide already on a $45 million budget. So that is just awesome. Now, with what happens next, I'm sure Warner's is going to look into doing a sequel, but, Zach Kreger's got other ideas in mind of what he wants to do next. So we'll see what happens with that. At number 3, Freakier Friday, dipping also 37%, bringing in a total of 8 million. And its total now stands at 70 million, which is pretty good for a throwback old school type of Disney comedy. Again, these movies usually used to be the norm for them, but they don't do them that much anymore. It's nice to see Lindsay Lohan having this comeback. Jamie Lee Curtis has been on a heater since her Oscar win, so she's been involved in a lot of stuff. This movie's brought in $42 million internationally in the total gross is 115 million worldwide. And again, I don't know what the exact budget on this, but I'm sure it didn't cost a lot to make. So this is a pretty modest hit for Disney, which they so desperately need right now, because the next movie, The Fantastic Four: First Steps, has been their major disappointment for the year. This was supposed to be the movie that was supposed to really turn things around for the MCU, and it's kind of done the complete opposite. The dip wasn't so bad this week, 33%, bringing in $6 million for a total of $257 million. Now, again, any other movie, this is awesome, but this is the MCU, and they have standards, and they did put a lot on this movie. And worldwide, it's done about almost the same as domestic. If you count up everything, it's about $230 million for a total of almost $500 million worldwide. But, you know, again, the standard was set super high for this one. They had high expectations for it, and it's just not living up to the billing. And then at number 5, dipping 32%, is The Bad Guys 2, bringing in $5 million for a total of $66 for Universal Pictures. Again, not bad for, an animated sequel that was dumped in the middle of August. It's brought in $88 million internationally for a worldwide total of $155. So I think that's going to be enough to greenlight the third movie. But again, I saw this and I thought it was just middle of the road movie and not a lot of life to it. And that's your top 5 box office for the weekend of the 22nd. Coming up this weekend, we got Caught Stealing, which is the new Darren Aronofsky movie starring Austin Butler and Zoe Kravitz. Not sure if I'm going to make it out to the theaters this weekend. I've got work, and then, of course, covering WWE Clash in Paris. I'll be watching that most of Sunday, early Sunday into like late Sunday afternoon. So not sure there's going to be much more that many movie reviews on this show, and especially with football ramping up. So there's going to be a lot of football talk. And then, of course, TV with Peacemaker, which I'll talk about in just a little bit. That's what's really going to be mostly the focus on this show. So, and I'm not expecting this movie to be number 1 either. So either Weapons goes back to number 1. I don't know if K-pop Demon Hunters is going to keep its theatrical distribution through this weekend, but I'll have to double check on that. But either way, Caught Stealing shouldn't make a dent, and either Weapons or K-pop Demon Hunters, if it's still around, will be the number 1 movie this weekend. And the numbers, again, this is where it's going to be kind of like, it looks dire for the box office, but then once we hit into, mid-September, October, and then in and out to Christmas and all that, we'll see the box office ramp up just again. But again, it'll be light on the box office news. But still a lot of stuff to talk about here on the Robert Palace podcast. So let's take a quick break. When we come back, Peacemaker Season 2 is here after a 3 or 4 year absence. But it is now connected to James Gunn's new DCU. We'll talk about all of that and how it connects to Superman coming up. Thank you for listening. We'll be right back.
Such a nice, small-town boy. You like baseball, call your mom every day.
Love you, Mom.
Come on, kids, get a room.
Sorry, Miss Kitty. I've got to fly back to London. I need you to take care of my cat. Who are you?
What did you get me into?
Welcome to Narnia.
Should I stay or should I?
It's a huge amount of cash.
And you're their fall guy.
It's not happening.
Austin Butler.
Mom, I need you to get out of the house.
Go to Jackie's.
The game is started.
Watch the game at her place, Mom.
Caught Stealing. In theaters August 29th.
Welcome back to the show. Caught Stealing, starring Austin Butler and Zoe Kravitz, from director Darren Aronofsky, starts on Friday. Again, I don't think I'm going to be able to check this one out this weekend, or even there soon. So unfortunately, this might be like until it hits streaming kind of thing for me, even though I do love the theatrical experience and always promote you to go see things on the big screen. I'm glad this movie exists. It's based on the book. Nice little like action comedy with pretty people on screen hooking up, meaning like Austin Butler and Zoe Kravitz. There's a lot of clips of them in the marketing of them like making out and stuff like that. So, again, I'm glad this movie exists. I'm glad it's like not like another sequel coming out. So, but unfortunately, I don't think it's going to draw enough traction for it to do much at the box office, but the fact that it got made is awesome, and that it's getting distributed on a high level, worldwide, or not worldwide, at least wide domestically, is a good sign for the theaters. All right, let's get into Peacemaker season 2. Now, a little bit of context. I just barely caught up with finishing season 1 of Peacemaker, which I believe came out in 2021. It was sometime around the pandemic. Now, I remember not liking or not getting into it fully when it first came out, and watching it as it was happening. I remember getting into the first and second episode, and I don't know, I just wasn't feeling it. Now, maybe I was going through stuff at the time and I wasn't really locked in. So, after watching Superman, which was the rebranding and rehabilitation of DC on film, James Gunn did a really convincing job of saying okay, I'm invested in this world that he's going to bring to us for DC. I thought it was a really solid film. I don't know if it's going to make my top 10, but I was just really thoroughly entertained by Superman, and I think James Gunn did a great job of bringing in new characters and getting us to like Superman again, and just giving us different iterations of different stuff, the Lex Luthor by freaking Nicholas Hoult was a revelation in that movie. He was so good. So I was like, yeah, man, I'm going to be totally invested in whatever he's got going next for the DCU, as it's called. He does have Creature Commandos or Commandos, I think is what it's called. It's on HBO Max. I'm going to have to revisit that. That came before Superman, and it's animated, but like I said, I'm going to be into everything that the DCU's got going on, so I will be following mostly everything that they do, including next year's Supergirl and Clayface. Now, if you've seen Superman, and again, spoiler, sorry if you haven't, it's been out a while. If you really wanted to see it, you would have seen it already. So, Peacemaker, played by John Cena, does pop up in this movie for a couple of seconds, establishing that he is part of this world. Now, the Peacemaker character was introduced in the Suicide Squad, which came out in 2021, I believe, August 2021. So maybe Peacemaker came out in 2022. I gotta double check on the timeline. But either way, so he was introduced in the Suicide Squad, which was also directed by James Gunn. And I thought he was fantastic in the role and in that movie. A little bit darker, a little bit grittier. But I thought he gave a fantastic performance. And they quickly had announced, once that movie came out, that he was getting his own spin-off show. And again, so now let's get to my rewatch of season 1. I thought it was very funny, very, very violent, very gross, very adult humor. So if you have kids and you're going to try to get them to watch stuff in the DCU, I probably wouldn't recommend Peacemaker, just because it is very high adult content, and it's very, there's a lot of graphic stuff, including stuff that happened in the season 2 premiere, which we'll get to in just a bit. But I thought it was a really well-told story, a lot of likable characters, including Harcourt, played by Rebecca Holland, who's James Gunn's wife. There's Economos, there's Vigilante, there's Adebayo, there's just this whole ragtag group, very Guardians of the Galaxy, which is kind of the tone that James Gunn has set for this, because if you've seen Superman, it's also a bunch of ragtag characters, including Superman, getting all together to fight off evil in the world. So, again, season 1 I thought was really well done, but it came before James Gunn took over, so it's what's gonna cross over from what was then known as the DC Extended Universe, and gonna make its way over to the new DCU. So seeing John Cena pop up in Superman, it's oh, okay, and them, of course, making that season 2 made it kind of very clear that Peacemaker is going to be very involved in the new DC established universe. But it's just called the DCU. Again, hate to harper that in, but we just have to establish DCU is what it's going to be called, not the DCEU, which it was when Zack Snyder was kind of doing everything. So season 2 really picks up kind of where Superman left off, and a lot of the characters that were introduced in Superman, including Hawk Girl and Guy Gardner, Green Lantern, played by Nathan Fillion, They show up here, and just to show you that it's completely connected. In the season 1 finale of Peacemaker, the Justice League shows up in silhouettes, and you do get Jason Momoa's Aquaman and Ezra Miller's The Flash that show up. Now, they redid that in the season 2 recap, or the season 1 recap in the season 2 premiere, where they shoehorn in the Hawk Girl and Guy Gardner characters, and then the silhouettes of Superman, Supergirl, and Mr. Terrific, who are established in the DCU, the new DCU, are there taking place of what was once the Justice League. And in this universe, they're known as the Justice Gang. So they're not known as the Justice League just yet. So they're kind of getting it started. So there's no Batman around, there's no Wonder Woman, there's no Flash. Only Superman's involved, and he's kind of like only a little bit affiliated with them, but not really. So they do a lot of retconning and just stuff to kind of get you just situated into this new DC universe headed by James Gunn. Now, I don't think any of it was confusing, because they are doing like kind of multiverse, different thing, but they're not throwing it in your face like the way a Marvel does it. So I thought that was really well done in the recapping, so that way, in case you didn't really watch season 1 and you're just now starting with season 2, they really do catch you up to speed as to what's going on, and then just to get you into this world now. So in season 1, that ragtag group of people got together and they saved the world and all that, but there was repercussions for it because it exposed a lot of the dark underground stuff that Amanda Waller, who heads up the Suicide Squad, she was kind of like at the head of some of this stuff. So she kind of uses this team here with Peacemaker and all the buddies surrounding as kind of like collateral damage. So when we open up here with season 2, they're kind of like all struggling to find work after the fact, even though they saved the world. And again, that's all given to you in the season 1 recap, or you can just watch season 1 for yourself. I'm not going to really get into that. I really want to more focus on what's happening here in season 2. So they're all trying to find jobs. They're all kind of like blacklisted and kind of like just still not really given their due or respect. And Peacemaker goes into a job interview for the Justice Gang because he now thinks he's a superhero. And the interview is kind of treated as a joke. And you see Guy Gardner here and Hawk Girl in the interview. Sounds like I'm saying Hawk Girl, but it's Hawk Girl. Sorry again, I'm so rehabilitating from this flu, so if I don't sound completely 100%, I apologize, but it's Hawk Girl and Guy Gardner, along with Max Lord, played by, I forgot what James Gunn's brother's name is, but he's playing that character who was also briefly mentioned in Superman. So again, it's all connected. It's all in this new world. And that, interview goes sideways, and, all these characters again are just dealing with the aftermath, and some of them are on good terms, some of them are not, and either way, Peacemaker's journey here is just trying to find his place, and he thought he was doing good, and on this path to transitioning into a good guy. Not that he's a bad guy, but he's done a lot of bad things, so his character's a little bit more complicated, and it's not just black and white. There's a lot of gray there. He has this room in his dad's house, who was played by Robert Patrick, and it's got all the equipment there for the Peacemaker outfit and whatnot, but it's also kind of like and if you saw Superman, it's kind of like a little pocket universe and little portals into different dimensions. Again, you got to suspend your disbelief because this is comic book lore, so there's just going to be a bunch of that stuff, so you kind of like, either you're with it or you're not. But here it plays it straight. It doesn't try to like explain everything. It's just like something that he has in that house. So it's like a little basement or just like a little different room, and it's got, again, portals to different stuff. And Peacemaker gets tempted to go into this one door in that room, and it leads him into an alternate universe of his same world. But in that universe, he's looked at as a hero. He's got his dad, who, if you watch season 1, he's a villain and he's a pretty awful, terrible guy, a racist, and all that stuff. His brother's not with him. There was an accident that happened, and John Cena's Peacemaker ended up killing his brother as a kid. But in this universe, his brother's alive. So there's questions of whether Peacemaker feels like he may be a better fit in this universe because he's trying to go good and he wants to be looked at as a hero, and he's also kind of got a little bit of a love interest going on with the Harcourt character, who in the real universe, in the real world that he's in, they're kind of like at odds and they're always bickering and all that. But in that other dimension that he goes into, turns out they have a relationship with each other, or had one previously. So there's something there. So there's a lot of intrigue there for the Peacemaker character, and it's going to be a whole thing that they're probably going to dive into this entire season, of whether Peacemaker, goes into that universe and makes that his home, or continues to try to make things do in his actual real world. There's also other characters that show up from Superman. Frank Grillo, who plays Rick Flag Sr., is in this season of the show. His character is the father of Rick Flag Jr., who was in the Suicide Squad and who was killed by Peacemaker. So that's why he's in this show. He's keeping a close eye on Peacemaker, kind of wants to see him mess up so he can, bust him and put him away. So that's very much... So it's pretty much made certain that the Suicide Squad from 2021, directed by James Gunn, is established canon in this new DC world. So that pretty much puts in play that Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn is going to be involved at some point. I'm not saying like anytime soon, but the fact that they keep mentioning the Suicide Squad and they make reference to all of that stuff, that just pretty much makes it certain that all of these characters that were involved in that movie are at some point going to make their way into the new DCU. And that also paves the way for Sylvester Stallone's King Shark, which is a character I really enjoyed in that movie. So all of that stuff is in play, but whatever. We're still sticking with Peacemaker. So I think a lot of the season is going to deal with him, like, diving into both dimensions and seeing, like, where he may want to end up. And, who knows? Just because they shoehorned in Hawk Girl and Guy Gardner into the real world of where Peacemaker's at right now, currently, that could just be a different alternate version. Maybe the door that he went to in this episode into that world where his brother's still alive and his dad's not a piece of shit. Maybe that's the world where Superman is taking place, and all the stuff that happened in the Superman movie. Again, a lot of interesting stuff that we're going to have to get through. Again, this is the first episode. I believe it's going to be 8 episodes, so there's going to be a lot to dive into here. So, James Gunn is a good storyteller, so I have a lot of trust that he's going to be able to do this justice. This episode was very graphic also, so be careful if you're going into it. There is a huge orgy sex scene in this episode, and it was a little too much for me also. There was a lot of dicks, a lot of just everything in that episode, just in that specific scene, and it goes on for a couple of minutes, at least 5 minutes, and it was very it was very HBO, we'll just say that. Like, this show's on HBO Max. That is a very HBO thing that they did, and they got away with it. And, you don't see it a lot now, but, every now and then HBO will put in that little shock value, just like, hey, you're watching an HBO show. So, but I had a lot of fun with it. They're gonna, I need to mention the big thing that happens at the end of this first episode. So, obviously, the Peacemaker from the real world goes into that other dimension, like I mentioned, right? Well, there's got to be another Peacemaker, right? So there is, and they come head-to-head, one-on-one at the very end of this episode, and they get into a fight, and the John Cena Peacemaker that we've come to know from the first season and that first movie ends up killing that Peacemaker, so now he's kind of gonna have to be in that universe to make up for the absence of that Peacemaker being gone. So that's all gonna play out. It's gonna be a lot of fun. Again, they've established good characters here, so they're gonna continue to develop them here. James Gunn just has a good way of making you care about these characters, and they're not just people that are in the show. So a lot to look forward to there. I'm excited about it. I'm excited about this new DCU that we're in. Again, I'm gonna be watching everything associated with it. I think James Gunn has just given us good reason to trust, and now with his delivery of Superman and everybody going out to see that and everybody, for the most part, enjoying it. So I think, again, DC's got all the momentum right now as opposed to Marvel, which I know they got 2 Avengers movies coming up, but even then, their momentum right now is not in the way that it should be, and that's all headed towards DC. So again, I'm not gonna lie to you all. I do favor DC a bit more just because they do have Batman, but also if you're just a good storyteller and know how to do this stuff and just give us entertaining product, then we have no choice but to like it, right? Or just enjoy it. Like, we can't help it. So that's what James Gunn's doing right now. Marvel used to do that really well, at least in the first few phases of their movies, but they've kind of lost their way. And, would I like for them to get back to what they had originally? I'd love it because it's just a win-win for everybody. But right now, DC's delivering on the comic book front. So, it just is what it is right now. But that's Peacemaker Season 2 premiere. I'll be talking about this show weekly as we get episodes weekly, and I think it's going to be 8. So for sure, 8 straight weeks of talking about Peacemaker on this show. That's going to do it for Peacemaker Talk. Let's take one final break, and then when we come back, I got a lot of wrestling stuff to talk about, including WWE's Clash in Paris premium live event coming to you this Sunday. The final one from Peacock. I'll get into that more, why, in just a little bit. We'll be right back.
On Sunday, August 31st, WWE in Paris.
An absolutely incredible scene.
Create a masterpiece.
This is what World Wrestling Entertainment is all about.
WWE Clash in Paris.
Welcome back to the show. WWE Clash in Paris coming to you this Sunday on Peacock, the final streaming premium live event on that platform. WWE has contractually fulfilled its duties as far as like giving you the amount of content that Peacock required in their contract with them. As I mentioned to you on the last show, WWE has partnered with ESPN to distribute their premium live events. So you're going to have to get the ESPN app to start watching it. Now, if you don't have Hulu Live TV, DirecTV streaming, and I forgot what the other one is, you're going to have to pay $30 a month to get that streaming app. But if you have those cable streamers that I just mentioned, ESPN becomes a part of that, and you don't have to pay any extra, but you're still paying a lot because you're paying for that cable subscription, which for the most part, I think most of them start at like $80 at the minimum. So either way, we're going to be paying more now for the WWE product as a premium live event. WWE's just got their stranglehold on everything now. Like they're just spreading their seed everywhere. So they've got dominance in Netflix. That's where Monday Night Raw streams. They're on the CW with NXT. They're on Tubi, that free streaming platform. They have their developmental program Evolve on there, as well as past episodes of NXT. So they're in the YouTube space with their Vault channel, where they put a lot of classic old content that you've never seen before. Some of it, yes, but a lot of it that you haven't seen before. So they're just everywhere, and I think they're just trying to dominate the entire landscape. And this is a good deal for them going to ESPN. It's going to get more eyeballs on them because you're getting the football fan base, the basketball fan base. ESPN, I thought they were a dying network just for the longest time because they pivoted I believe, in the wrong direction as far as like the way they would cover stuff. But the fact now that they're getting WWE, and they've also purchased the NFL Network along with the NFL Red Zone, like ESPN is on the up and up again. So, and the NFL is the hottest sport in the entire world. So, they're doing the right things right now and partnering with the right people, especially the brands that are hot right now, including the NFL and WWE. You could say what you want about professional wrestling, but it really is one of the most coveted brands right now as far as like you want their content. And as I mentioned, everything that they're on right now. So they're in high demand. So ESPN paid a big price to get them. I believe it was like 1 billion to get their pay-per-views or premium live events onto their platform. It's more than what Peacock was going to be offering. And even then, Peacock is still going to have WWE stuff because they still own most of their classic content library, like the past episodes of SmackDown, Saturday night's main event's going to be the exclusive home there now. They're not going to air it on NBC anymore. It's going to be just a Peacock exclusive. So, just a lot going on with WWE. And like I said, Clash in Paris will be the final event airing from Peacock. And if you don't want to pay that $29.99 when they go to ESPN next month, you can also, they've made a deal also with Regal Theaters and Fandango. You can watch their events on the big screen. And I believe the most you're going to pay for a ticket there is between the $10 to $20 range. So if you want to save yourself an extra $10 and not get the app, go watch it on the big screen. I may do that for one of their events just to see how it goes. I used to watch the AEW events at Cinemark theaters, and that was always a fun experience. You get to see it with a crowd and all that stuff. It's not the same as watching it there live in person. Nothing will ever compare to watching a WWE event live in person or any wrestling event in person, but it was still a fun experience. So there's another option for you there. And again, WWE is just spreading it everywhere where they want you to know that you can watch them on any platform. They're also deep in the podcast network. They've got so many podcasts led by so many wrestlers, and that's dominating the charts. Again, WWE just doesn't want to dominate one spectrum. They want to dominate the whole field. So, Clash in Paris this Sunday. We'll get to the card and I'll run it down in just a bit. But still staying with the ESPN thing. So originally that was going to start next year with WrestleMania. That was going to be the kickoff point. But now that WWE is kind of like fulfilled its obligations to Peacock, they're going to ESPN starting next month, and they brought up a new event called WrestlePalooza, which is going to be airing on September 20th, and that's going to be going up against AEW's All Out pay-per-view. So you want to talk about going real head-to-head. This is the first time that it's going to happen, and the reason why WWE is doing this is to dominate the headlines, and they want all the talk to be about them. So if I'm AEW, this isn't going to deter like the hardcore fan base of theirs that's specifically just to them. Like, I like to watch AEW too, right? I'm a hardcore wrestling fan, so I watch all of it. But right now, their television is very much left to be desired. Now, they do put on really good pay-per-views and they put on really good matches, but from a storytelling week-to-week perspective, their television shows are just not doing it for me. They're almost on as background noise for me. Like, I'll have it on and I'll pay attention to what's going on, in increments. Most of the time I'm on my phone, but that's not my fault. It's because they're not putting on a very enthusiastic product. Now, I can say the same thing for WWE, but, they at least give you production packages and tell you what's going on in their shows, and they're at least attempting to do some type of coherent week-to-week storytelling, even though sometimes their shows are lackluster, including SmackDown. If you watch SmackDown as of late, it's just very... There's a couple of moments here and there, but the show is just very almost unwatchable. Not to the point where it was in late 2018, 2019 when Vince McMahon was still in charge, where that was just atrocious television. But they're almost kind of coasting, but they keep getting these giant deals with these networks and streamers that it's kind of hard to deny that they're just the top dog in pro wrestling. And now with them, the main, we've seen WWE go head to head with AEW, but we've seen it done through their NXT shows, which is they're considered, they're developmental, but kind of not really because they're on network television. So, but they're the step before you get to Raw or SmackDown, and they've put up their shows against AEW, and they've rarely done any dents. But now you put up a main roster show where you got John Cena and Brock Lesnar and CM Punk and everybody else. You put up a show that's going to have them on it up against AEW. That's not going to be good for them in terms of you want people talking about your show, but if WWE is going to be running a show the same day as you in the same time, more than likely WWE is going to be all over Twitter, all over Facebook, all over Instagram, TikTok, wherever, and AEW is kind of going to have to be an afterthought. Not have to, but they are. And again, that's not WWE's fault. If AEW is putting on a better product, it would be a real head-to-head, and it'd be oh man, what do I want to watch live as it's going on? So AEW needs to really step up its game, I think. You can't just put together like great wrestling matches like that. It's not going to do it. You have to have compelling storylines. So you have to give us good television that's going to make us want to invest in your pay-per-view show. Now, we know your wrestlers can deliver on the night of the pay-per-view because they just have a great talent pool of wrestlers that can give you awesome matches. But it's got to be about more than that. For wrestling, it's got to be about the storytelling. It's got to be us investing in the characters, and it makes the matches mean more. So if this doesn't give AEW the kick in the butt that it needs to, really amp up its creative, then WWE is just going to take over the headlines all the time, and they won't care if they're going up head to head against you because they're not worried about taking attendance away. They're not worried about taking ratings away. All they care about is taking the headlines away from you, and they want everybody on Twitter talking about John Cena versus Brock Lesnar or whatever it is that they're going to do on that show on September 20th. They're going to want you talking about that. So just a heat of advice for Tony Khan and AEW. You really need to ramp up your stuff, or, you can't just rely on making matches. Like, that's not going to do it in today's landscape where it's a very, we're living in an ADD world, right? Where our attention spans are just, we're pay attention to one thing, just look at Instagram and TikTok. All the reels and all the clips are like just a couple seconds and then we move on to the next thing, and that's all that's going to be filled with on September 20th. It's going to be a bunch of clips of WWE, and they're going to ramp up that show to make it feel like a WrestleMania. Like, they really want to dominate, and this is going to be their first show on ESPN. You don't think they're going to go all out? I remember when they premiered on Fox, they did a whole red carpet thing, and they made it like if it was the NFL, where they had a huge pregame show, and then they gave us a big show. The Rock showed up and all that stuff. So you don't think when WWE goes on ESPN that they're going to not deliver a high quality product, even though it's just like a made up show that they just brought out. It's not like a WrestleMania or a SummerSlam. You don't think they're not going to treat it like it? You got another thing coming, AEW, and I worry as far as like them not ramping up their storytelling. And I just watched Dynamite last night. They came off one of their other pay-per-views where they deliver the in-ring product there, but then their follow-up is just very lackluster and not really giving us anything to really sink our teeth into. And it didn't used to be like that. Like, AEW would give us shows where week to week you would leave us hanging, like wanting more. But that was back in the early days, back when they still had CM Punk and Cody Rhodes, but we're far removed from those days. And, again, you can't just rely on making matches and thinking that that's what's going to be. Like, yes, I love to watch the wrestling matches, but more than anything, like, wrestling is a soap opera. You have to give us storylines that make us care about watching those matches. And I think Tony Khan is still very like-minded, where he thinks the matches are what are going to sell. And yes, they are the sell, but that's not all of it. You have to, like, why do we care about seeing The Rock versus Stone Cold? We cared about the story leading up to it and the characters interacting with each other and them wanting to bring out the best in each other. Why do we care about Austin versus McMahon? It wasn't so much the match. Like, yes, we wanted to see them fight in a wrestling match, but it was the story leading up to it and all the antics and all the soap opera they would give us every week. So that's the interesting coming out of this Peacock deal, is that WWE is going straight to ESPN moving forward starting September 20th. And they're going to treat those shows, all of them are going to be huge because they're on a bigger platform now, and they're going to get more media coverage. Sports Center will be talking about WWE, and they'll be getting more highlight clips, not just on the ESPN platforms, but of course Instagram, TikTok. They're going to be all over the place. So this needs to be a big wake-up call to AEW. And another thing that's going to hurt them is they're losing two of their biggest stars right now to injury, in Will Ospreay and Swerve Strickland. They're going to be out a significant amount of time. So who have you built up other than, the veterans that are there already, like an Adam Copeland and Christian Cage? But those guys are way beyond their prime. And, they're not what's going to drive the future of your television. So they need to really, if anything, all they have now is to draw back and try to tell good stories and make us care, because the matchmaking is going to be little left to be desired because you're losing two of your biggest stars that are two of your best wrestlers on that roster. I don't know. Doesn't look good for AEW, but that's just my 2 cents on it. Let's get to Clash in Paris on Sunday. It's going to be airing at 1 o'clock my time. It'll be 2 o'clock on the East Coast, and then 11 a.m. on the West Coast. The final event from Peacock in Paris. It's going to be an electric crowd. The international crowds are usually a little bit better than the U.S. crowds as of late. We have examples of that. With Backlash and Lyon, France. Last year, that crowd was just insane. They did London for Money in the Bank a few years ago, and that did incredible just crowd reception for that. So I'm expecting a good crowd here in Paris for this event, and some pretty good matches also on the card. So let's start with the first one. Becky Lynch defending the Women's Intercontinental Championship against Nikki Bella. I'm looking forward to this. This has got a little bit of story behind it. So the story here is Becky Lynch has finally moved on from Lyra Valkyria. Lyra Valkyria can no longer challenge Becky for the Intercontinental Championship because that was the stipulation in their SummerSlam match. So Becky's free to just kind of like take over, move on to the next thing. So Nikki Bella returned, I believe it was like a month and a half to almost 2 months ago. She was going to be feuding with Liv Morgan. That was going to be a big feud heading into the Evolution show that they had back in July. But she got injured, so Nikki Bella was kind of left in the, kind of like in limbo. Like, what is she going to do? Now, she's not like the best wrestler. She was from the Diva era, back where they weren't really taking women's wrestling too seriously. But towards the end of her run, she did get pretty better in ring, and she's also got a character, right? She's also brought a huge following from having like the Total Divas show and the Total Bella show. So she brought a lot of different eyeballs to the product. So she's a trailblazer in a sense. And I know a lot of the wrestling fan base don't really like her and think she's from like, just an era like where we just didn't care about them. But she at least tried with the materials she was given. And she was the longest reigning Divas champion of that time. So, and she's not a bad wrestler. She's gotten better as the years gone by, and I know she's not like in her prime anymore as far as like character wise. She's more like at the tail end. She's a nostalgia act, but she can still have some decent matches. And as I've mentioned before, Becky Lynch is very good at elevating other talents. So if Nikki Bella is like just decent in the ring right now, you put her in the ring with Becky Lynch, it's just going to elevate her just even more. And the story going into this is that Nikki Bella thinks that Becky Lynch is afraid of her and didn't want to face her during her time because she was the one on top, but now Becky Lynch is kind of like just resorted to this like coward character and just has no courage or anything like that. So Nikki Bella kind of goaded her into the match, and it's just been some nice back and forth between them. Becky Lynch has given Nikki Bella a good shot as far as like teasing her about dating John Cena once upon a time and all that. There's been good back and forth. And I'm excited for this match. I know there's a lot of people on the internet that don't care and think like Becky Lynch is worthy of someone better. But again, it's not always about the wrestling. It's about the characters. It's about the story. And say what you want about Nikki Bella. She's a interesting character and entertaining to watch. And the crowd is invested. She gets pops when she comes out, when her music hits. So there's a lot of interest in her still being around. And Nikki Bella's she said she's going to be around for a while, so this isn't some one-off. So could we see her become the Intercontinental Champion? I'm going to go ahead and predict yes. Why not? Right now, the Raw women's division is lacking in terms of like a top heel. Now, we just had Naomi, who was the champion, had to relinquish her title because she's pregnant, so she's going to be off television for a while, and she was taking place of Liv Morgan, who was the top women's heel there on that show, but she got injured. So you kind of need someone in that spot right now, and you've got a lot of baby faces. You got Rhea Ripley, you got Io Sky, you got Stephanie Vaquette. So you really need that top female baby face, or heel, I should say. And originally, Stephanie Vaquette was to challenge the women's world champion at this show, but that's not going to happen. And Adam Pearce said, hey, give me like a week to figure out somebody, and I think they're going to have this match. I don't know if it's going to be on Raw or at a pay-per-view at some point. But I think Becky Lynch would be good for that spot. She has the credibility, and she has the charisma to carry that division as the top heel on that show. And a Becky versus Stephanie matchup would be very interesting because you have it's very easy to say like, well, let's slide in Rhea Ripley or Io Sky into that spot. But right now they're in a little bit of a feud with the Kabuki Warriors, with Asuka and Kairi saying that's kind of like, that's roasting over there. That's building up to something that's going to eventually explode. So leave them there. Leave them there and do that separate storyline, and you can have Becky slide into the main event World Championship scene. I think it works out perfectly. And then you can have Nikki Bella with that Intercontinental title and have her work with the undercard and develop these younger women, like a Maxine Dupree. You can even get Lyra Valkyria back into the mix. Bayley. There's potential feuds there for Nikki Bella to get into, and to make that Women's Intercontinental Championship. Because I think Becky's done enough with it that she could. And again, the only reason that you take Becky out of that spot is because she needs to be the Raw division needs a top heel. And, I hate to say it, but Asuka's not going to really be that person. Now, she would have been years ago when she first made her debut on the roster, but she's kind of not in that spot anymore. So Becky's still like a very big top name. So I would make her the top heel in that division and have her compete with Stephanie for the World Championship. And then have maybe Becky win the world title and then have everybody else chase her. Gives her a lot of opponents because, like I said, you have a lot of babyface women on that show. So that's my prediction. Nikki Bella will win the Intercontinental Championship, and this is the only championship I think that we'll see change hands on that show. Next up, Roman Reigns versus Bronson Reed. This is a good match here for Bronson Reed. He's part of the Vision group with Seth Rollins and Braun Breaker. The story going into this match, and it's a stupid pro wrestling thing, but I loved it. I've been getting a kick out of it, is Bronson Reed has been getting the better of Roman Reigns whenever he tries to come down and help the good guys and he gets beat down. And the thing Bronson Reed has been doing is stealing the sneakers off of Roman Reigns and wearing them as like a necklace, like a shrine. He calls himself the tribal thief. Roman Reigns is the tribal chief. Bronson Reed is the tribal thief. Now they've built him up a little bit here, so this is awesome. This is a new character that's getting to make a name for himself at the expense of a big top star. Now the match, personally, I'm not looking forward to it. I think it'll be just okay, but having that international crowd, I think they'll be a lot more into it, so maybe I'll get into it more because of that. I expect Roman Reigns to win here and get some type of revenge because he's been getting the better of. But this is going to help Bronson Reed in the long run because, you want to establish new characters, new threats, and the fact that he's been taking down Roman Reigns just kind of leaves you like with that side eye, like, don't forget about this guy, like he's a credible threat as well. So Roman Reigns gets the win here, but the big winner overall is going to be Bronson Reed because he got himself over with this spot and stealing those sneakers, which again was a super highlight for me. I was laughing week after week when he was doing it, and I'm like, this is the best gimmick going. Keep doing it and keep building yourself up. Even if like the aspect of stealing shoes is stupid, but that's a thing that also caters to like the young people, right? Like young people are all about like those sneakers and the Jordans, so I can see that resonating with the young audience and them like kind of getting into that and wanting to see Roman get his revenge. So I like this. I like the story behind this matchup, but I think it'll be whatever, but Roman Reigns will win. Next up, we got a good old-fashioned Donnybrook match, which is basically just a street fight. It's I think it's an Irish thing. It's Sheamus versus Rusev, which I believe this is like their third or fourth meeting. They've been having a couple of battles on Raw, and some of them have been decisive. Some of them have been, I think, I forward some of this stuff. Like again, I watch a lot of wrestling, but I also forward stuff. I'm not watching every little thing. I just know that they've been feuding with each other, but they've been getting in brawls like backstage and, ringside area and, parking lots and all this stuff. And it's kind of, this is what it's been leading to, right? It's going to lead to this like big old fashioned like street fight that's got to be settled. I still think down the line they're going to become a tag team, I think. Sometimes the best of enemies turned out to be better friends, and they end up going for the tag team gold. But right now they're embroiled in this, just who's the better hoss, the bigger guy. Sheamus is usually good about doing these kinds of matches and having like just standout matches in general. So the crowd, I think, is going to be really into this one, and I see Sheamus coming out on top in Paris. Now that's 3. baby faces that I've seen that I've picked. So you gotta leave some room, right? You gotta leave some wiggle room for like the bad guys. Got to get their end, and they got to get their comeuppance or their victories. Coming up next, John Cena versus Logan Paul. John Cena and Logan Paul have been going at it for the last couple of weeks. They were tag team partners earlier this year at Money in the Bank, but that was when John Cena was still on his heel run. But he has since reverted back into a babyface, and the crowd's all into him. And, you know, it's the typical good guy John Cena trying to, you know, just beat the crap or beat some sense into this. We can't call him a rookie anymore, but he's still kind of a youngin in Logan Paul, like this harsh, cocky, brass, young kid that thinks he's like the future of the business. And he may very well be, but right now he's still like on the learning curve. And they've been going back and forth. And, you know, what slew me is that September 20th show that's coming up, that's going to be on ESPN. And we saw Brock Lesnar return at SummerSlam and attack John Cena. So that's where this is all leading to. So there's going to have to be some sort of another kickstart to that. So on last week's SmackDown, we had Nick Aldis speak to John Cena in the back saying, hey, like I heard from Brock Lesnar, and there was something that was going to be revealed there before Logan Paul knocked out John Cena, and, you know, just to hype up more for their match. So, and there was also a segment where Logan Paul talked with Drew McIntyre, who's another person he's been partnering with, and Drew McIntyre told him, like, hey, you got to do whatever you can to beat Cena and beat him in Paris. Now, that was before he knocked him out at the end of the show, but I don't think that's what he was alluding to. So I think in this matchup, at some point, I think Brock Lesnar is going to show up and cost John Cena the match, and that's how we get into their next one-on-one matchup on September 20th. So I see Logan Paul getting the victory here. He's going to get the heat, and it gives John Cena a reason to move forward, to want to get vengeance on Brock Lesnar. So I'm expecting some type of Brock Lesnar interference here, and that's how Logan Paul is going to get the victory over John Cena. And plus, it helps the Logan Paul character in terms of like confidence and just bragging about how he beat John Cena at a premium live event. So he can use that in his catalog to kind of build himself up more, because we think eventually he'll probably challenge again for the WWE title at some point, and he can use that. Like, I beat John Cena. Not many people can say that. So yeah, I see Logan Paul coming up here with the victory. And what I think is going to be the main event of the show is the Fatal 4-Way for the World Heavyweight title. Seth Rollins defending the title against CM Punk, Jey Uso, and LA Knight. Pretty good story leading up into this one. Obviously, we all know what happened at SummerSlam. CM Punk won the world title off Gunther. Seth Rollins cashes in, dupes everybody, quote unquote, into faking his injury, and ends up stealing the title from CM Punk. The way LA Knight is inserted into this is he was the last one who beat Seth Rollins before this quote unquote fake injury. He beat him on Saturday night's main event, so he has a reason for challenging Seth for the title. Now, how we led to that was the night after SummerSlam, LA Knight came out and said, hey, don't forget, I'm the last person that beat you, so I'm going to challenge you for that title. They had a one-on-one championship match. CM Punk interfered and it got disqualified. Nothing was settled there, so that's how LA Knight gets into the mix. Now, how Jey Uso fits in, I'm not sure. I thought this was originally going to be Roman Reigns, but, you know, he's got that feud with Bronson Reed. I think he's really only in this match so they can do like the crowd thing in Paris where everyone does the eat. How he fits into the story is kind of like whatever. They're all trying to get at Seth Rollins, but in turn they've kind of like cross paths into getting in each other's faces. So you've seen some good dynamics between Punk and LA Knight, Punk and Jey Uso and LA Knight. They're all kind of like self-destructing before they try to get to Seth Rollins, who's the main antagonist in this entire thing. But I don't see him losing the title on Sunday. You know, they want to continue this CM Punk feud. I think at least all the way till Survivor Series when they all end up in War Games. We all know that's going to happen. They need to sell out a big baseball stadium. So Seth Rollins is going to retain here. Now, who I think eats the pin is going to be interesting. I don't think it's going to be CM Punk. He's lost his last couple of matches, so he needs to not be factored in here. I think either LA Knight or Jey Uso take the pin. it's excuse me, it's easy to say that Jey Uso's going to take it, but he's kind of been on a downward spiral ever since losing the world title, and LA Knight is really, I've said this, he's inserted himself into this Raw main event scene like a glove. He wasn't officially moved over to Monday Night Raw from SmackDown, but he's kind of just on Monday Night Raw now, so he's fit in perfectly, and I think if you pin him here, that doesn't hurt his credibility at all. I think he's just a strong player. He's too strong of a character, and this is why I think, and this is why I tell you, like, it's not just about the matches, it's about your character, it's about your story and how you present yourself, and the way LA Knight comes out, like, always presents himself like a top guy, talks like a top guy, so that doesn't hurt his character at all. So I think if he takes the pin on Sunday, it's not going to hurt him one bit. But I am predicting Seth Rollins to win this match and retain the world title. Now, it's either this or John Cena, Logan Paul that are going to main event, because those are the two biggest stories you got going on right now in WWE. So you have Seth and everyone chasing him for the title, and then that looming Brock Lesnar, John Cena confrontation. So something's got to lead into that. So if I had to guess, I would say John Cena, Logan Paul main events, but you always want your world title to be the big focus, so I can see that being the main event as well. But if you're just going to end it with Seth Rollins winning, that's not like fun. Like, have Brock Lesnar come out, stand tall, and beat up John Cena, get the heat, and maybe even bloody him up as you head into that September 20th show. As I mentioned, Stephanie Vaquera was originally supposed to challenge for the Women's World Championship here, so that would have been the 6th match. I'm recording this on a Thursday, so I'm not sure. Maybe they'll add one more match on tomorrow's SmackDown, but not sure what that would be. They got a couple of stuff that they could do, but not really that anything I can think of at the top of my head. So it may just end up being a 5-match card. This is the last one on Peacock. I don't know if they'll try to make it special. Probably not. They're more focused on that ESPN deal. But it should be a fun one. And again, this one's not going to be on Saturday. It's going to be on a Sunday, but it'll still be early on in the day. So, you can still enjoy your Sunday after that, after your 3 hours of watching wrestling. So good for me. I'm all about these earlier shows. Man, how I wish we could have had these shows when I was a kid growing up watching this. Saturday afternoons, just watch wrestling, then you have the rest of your Saturday to enjoy, and then Sunday you have all day off. As opposed to, like, when I was growing up, it was always Sunday evenings you'd watch these shows, and then you'd have to get ready for school the next day. So that sucked. So the kids have it good these days. That's Clash in Paris on Sunday from WWE. And that's going to do it for this episode of the Robert Palace Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. I greatly appreciate it. However you listen, whether you're at the gym, at home, or on your car ride home from work, you can listen to this on any of your podcast platforms, including Spotify, Apple, Amazon, Pandora. However you listen to your podcast, search the Robert Palace Podcast. I'm pretty sure it's on there. I've tried to get it on as many platforms as I can, and I'm active on the socials, mostly on Instagram. My page is always rocking on there. I'm always posting stuff, and I always post clips of the show, as well as TikTok. Those are probably the two biggest ones I'm active on, so you can follow me there at Robert Palace Podcast on Instagram and at Robert Palace Podcast on TikTok. Next week, more Peacemaker talk, and I'll probably get into my predictions for week 1 of the NFL. It's finally here, folks. We're getting back to football. I've needed it so bad. I need my weekly dose of my Buccaneers, my Patriots. It's going to be an exciting season. Fantasy football is also gearing up. I had my first draft for one of my leagues where I'm pretty content with who I drafted. And then I got my second league, which the draft is tomorrow evening. So I'm very much looking forward to that. I'm also recording tonight Game Time at the Movies, episode 2 with Abraham Trevino. The first episode's out now. You can listen to that. Game Time at the Movies, another pop culture sports podcast that I'm working on, co-collaborating with Abraham Trevino. We'll be recording that tonight, but this podcast will be out later today for you all to enjoy and listen whenever you get the chance. I greatly appreciate it. So thank you guys so much. We'll talk to you next week. God bless you.